Alright, so today we are finally starting the big two-seater project that we've been working towards, building all this stuff. Basically what we're building is I want to build a miniature trophy truck, a four-wheel drive trophy truck using a Hayabusa engine, some 32-inch tires. We got some king coilovers. I need to order some more king coilovers. These are for the rear suspension. I need to order some for the front. For right now, we're going to use these for mock-up. These are just cheap plastic seats. These are what I have laying around. We're going to use these for mock-up, and then, once we get further along in the build, I'm going to buy some much better seats because these suck. But we're just using them as mock-up. Now, let's start laying this thing out and try to figure out how big this thing's going to be. Alright, so I need to figure out how big do I want this thing to be. I know I'm calling this the mini trophy truck, and let's be honest, there's nothing mini about this thing. This thing's pretty big. So am I trying to make this as small and compact as possible, or am I more just like, let's just build it so it's comfortable. We got plenty of leg room, plenty of room between the driver and passenger, plenty of room for suspension, plenty of room for a radiator and a gas tank and all that kind of stuff, or am I more trying to stick with the miniature side scale of this thing, because I'm calling it the mini trophy truck? Should I try to make this as small and compact as possible? Which I can. I totally could. Right now, with the way the tires are laid out, from outside of the tire to outside of the tire, this thing is 6 feet wide by 11 feet long, which is not that big. It's pretty much as wide as a Can-Am X3, and it's also as wide as a Jeep, so it'll definitely fit on Jeep trails if I leave it this big. And it'll maybe fit on most side-by-side trails. I think it's also as big as the VF1000 which I kind of hated that vehicle. I kind of hated how big that thing was. But it was more just, what I hated about it was the suspension sucked, didn't have that great of ground clearance, the tires were tiny, lack of power, no reverse, no low range. And we're fixing all that with this vehicle. Much bigger tires, better ground clearance, much better suspension, better engine. We got low range, we got reverse, so all that's fixed in this vehicle. So maybe it wouldn't be as bad if it's the same size as the VF1000. As long as this will fit in my trailer, and right now this will barely fit. If I left it this big, it'll barely fit on my trailer. I will have to take the gate off. I don't know. Part of me is kind of thinking like I should stick with the miniature scale of this thing because I'm calling it a mini trophy truck. I should try to build it as small and compact as possible. So I think let's just start laying out material. Let's just start figuring out, where the front suspension's going to be, where the seats are going to go, and then kind of just figure it out as we go along. So Rogue Fab gave us this tubing notcher. This is the VersaNotcher from Rogue Fab. They gave us this thing kind of a while ago. I don't use it that often because I mostly just use 1-inch round tubing. And if you're lazy like me, you don't really need to notch 1-inch tubing. You can kind of just butt it up against it and weld around it. But once you get up to 1.25 inches and bigger sizes, you do have to notch it. And this tool really helps with that. So I'll put a link in the description below for this thing. Definitely go check it out. If you do any sort of tubing work, any sort of frame building, you gotta have one of these things. So, let's start working on building the front bottom A-arms. Once we get those kind of built and tacked together and then tacked on the frame, that will kind of determine where everything else is going to go. So I forgot that this big heim joint uses a 5/8 bolt instead of a 3/4, so let me cut out some new plates. Alright, from center of the heim joint to center of the heim joint is 22 inches. Yep. 22 inches. So, I wanted to mock all this stuff up because I need to make sure that wherever we mount the shock, it's not going to be in the way of the tie rods or the CV axle. Normally I mount the shock in the middle, but obviously we can't do that because CV axle and the spool on this for the 4-wheel drive is kind of, it's in the way of everything. It's in the way of the rack and pinion. Normally we need to mount the rack and pinion like in here, like right in here, so therefore it's a straight line in between the spindles and the rack and pinion, but we can't do that because this giant sprocket's in the way, so we're gonna have to mount it like right here. But in order for this to work, we can't mount the heim joints for the tie rods. We can't mount them in line of the rack and pinion. They have to be mounted like right here, and then it'll all be mounted something like this. So therefore the tie rods can be in a straight line relative to the spindles. So we're just gonna have to figure out how we can offset the heim joints for the tie rods on the rack and pinion. So we're either gonna have to modify one or just make one from scratch. So now that we know a general area of how this is gonna work and where everything's gonna go, we can tack this stuff into place and then just know that the shock has to be mounted right here. So we just have to make a mount for the shock right here on the A-arms. So, I finally did it. Yesterday, I bought Fusion 360, and I spent all day yesterday learning and watching tutorials and figuring out how it works and everything, and last night I drew this up and then cut out a bunch of tabs using the ArcDroid plasma cutter, and they turned out really awesome. I'm excited about Fusion. I've been wanting to get Fusion 360 for quite a while now, and now that I finally have it, I'm going to be able to make pretty much almost anything I want with plate steel, which is exciting. I just have to spend a little bit more time and learning the software. Now, I decided to cut out 2 different thicknesses. This is 3/16 and this is 1/4 inch. I'm going to be using the 3/16 for the top A-arms, and then the 1/4 inch is going to be for the bottom A-arms. The bottom ones have to be a lot stronger. A-arms are done, they're all tacked together. Now let's tack them on the frame. I used the same jig to build both of these, even though they're symmetrically, different, but I'll just flip one over and it'll be the same. Just like that. So, I'm realizing I bent this up too much. Originally, I was thinking that I was going to have this part of the middle part of the frame bent, or not bent, but just angled at like 8 degrees. So therefore, I bent this at 18 degrees because I want the A-arms to be bent up 10 degrees because in my opinion, that's better than having the A-arms, flat and having the suspension just move straight up and down, because in my opinion, it's a lot better for suspension. It makes it to where the suspension can much better absorb rocks and bumps if the suspension can kind of move at an angle relative to just going straight up and down. If you hit a big rock, the suspension has a hard time moving out of the way quick enough, whereas if it's bent, at 10 degrees, it can much better move out of the way and not send all that shock load to the frame and the suspension absorbs. So in my opinion, this is better, but I was looking at trophy trucks, and looking at pictures of trophy trucks, and almost all trophy trucks, the A-arms are flat relative to the frame, and I'm not sure why. There must be a reason that they're flat, and I just can't figure out why. Because in my opinion, I think this is better. I think this works great. On the CBR 1000, it works amazing. You can actually see just how much easier it is for the suspension to move out of the way, out of big rocks and bumps and everything. And I've driven vehicles with A-arms that just move straight up and down, and you can feel anytime you just hit a big bump, you just feel it in the frame, and you just feel that the suspension just can't absorb it. So in my opinion, this is better. But I don't know why trophy trucks don't do it. There must be a reason. But in my opinion, this is better. So I'm gonna build it in my frame. But this is it's bent too much. So even though I just finished tacking all this stuff in place, now that I'm realizing that this piece of the frame needs to be flat, I need to bend this only at 10 degrees and not 18. So to fix this, I'm gonna cut all the tacks off, and then get new tubing, bend it at 10 degrees only, and then tack everything back into place. I'm not gonna bother recording it just because I already recorded. I already showed you guys tacking all this stuff in place. So I'm just going to quickly do it, and then we'll come back once it's done. We'll put the tires on, and then figure out where the seats need to go. So, I bent these new pieces to 10 degrees, and I'll be honest, I'm not really seeing that much of a difference. But, there's a little bit of a difference, but it's, I don't know, it's slight. It's a slight difference. So, anyway, let's put the tires on and start mocking up where everything else is going to go. May not be a good idea. So this is definitely the smallest I can make this thing while still remaining comfortable to sit. We got plenty of leg room. It's gonna be a little tight in here. Little, you know, not that much elbow room, especially on this side. So, to build this project, we're going to be using this as the jack shaft. This is 1.25" cold rolled round stock, and this is exactly the same size as the round stock that I used for the jack shaft of the CBR 1000. Now, normally when I buy this stuff, I only buy it in like 5 or 6 foot sections from a steel company, but because I use this stuff a lot, and I was also buying a lot of tubing, I asked them just to give me 20 feet just so I have this stuff in stock. And unfortunately, what they gave me has a slight bend in it. Now, because we're using this for a jack shaft, this can't have a bend in it. Now, this one's the worst. This has, I think, between a 5 foot span, if you measure from the center, this has a 70 thou offset. So this one's definitely the worst. This one's not as bad, but it's still not great. Again, I only need 5 feet, so within this 5 foot section, this only has like 30 thou of offset to it, but which I know is not great. But if you actually look at it, if I just put a little bit of weight on this thing, I can deflect this like 30 thou very easily. So I don't think this is the end of the world. But it's definitely not great. I mean, worst case would just wear the bearings out faster. I mean, I spent a lot of money on this. This was over $170 just for these two 10-footers. I'm just going to use this section. This has the least amount of wobble to it. So let's just cut it here, use this, and if it's really that bad, if it's really making it to where it's hard to turn this thing, worst case, I could just use this for mock-up and just get more of it and not ask for 20. Because what I'm thinking is because I asked for 20 feet, maybe they just picked it up from the center and the weight of it bent this slightly. So maybe don't ask for 20 feet next time. Just ask for like 5 or 6. So now that I cut the access off, I mean, it's still got like 30 thou of deflection, but I can, look at that, I can easily bend this thing just by putting just a little bit of weight on it. So I don't think this is the end of the world. I think this is still usable. It's not great, and I wish this was perfectly true. I don't want to try and bend it back. I don't think I can do that without making it worse. Yeah, let's just try it. We'll see how it works. So a lot of this, while I'm building this, is just me staring at this, figuring out, like, is this going to work? Is this long enough? What's the spacing between the axle and the rear tires? Are these tires going to clear the frame moving up and down? Is it, how far do I put, you know, this piece of tubing that's going to go here? Where do I put it? Is there going to be enough room for the steering to work? And, you know, a lot of this is just me staring at it, like figuring out, like, where do I put this? Where do I put this? This changes where I'm putting the seat, and then where the seats change where I'm putting the jack shaft, and the jack shaft changes where I'm putting the rear tires. So it's all just staring at it. That is pretty much what I've been doing the last, like, 4 days, mostly, working on this thing, is just staring at it. And also measuring everything. And also measuring off of the CBR 1000 and off the VF 1000, like checking this for reference, checking that for reference. So one reference is on the VF 1000, between the back of the seat and this bar where your feet go, it's 4 feet. And then the CBR 1000 is 3.5 feet between the back of the seat and the pedals, and the CBR 1000 is a little cramped in there. I'd like to have a little bit more room in this, so I'm trying to do almost 4 feet, but we can get away with 4 feet and still have not have this thing super long. So either we can sacrifice a little bit of legroom, like 2 or 3 inches of legroom, and gain 2 or 3 inches of trailing arm length and get a little bit more travel and everything. So I'm trying to, yeah. So, I think I finally figured out where the jack shaft's going to be, and it's going to be just right here. Now, I do want to bend this tail section up just a little bit to give us a little bit more ground clearance where the engine's going to be, and also make it to where we can have a little bit more suspension travel without the bottom of this hitting the ground. So, now, originally I was thinking, like, I gotta unbolt the A-arms and cut these apart yet again to bend these, but actually, I've been looking at this, and I think if I just move this isn't welded, I can just move it up, and then weld it right here, and then weld the ones up there a little bit stronger. I think I can just put this in the bender like this, and bend this one first, and then bend this one. So I think that'll work. So yeah, let's try it. Now, also I gotta figure out how much to bend this. I don't want to do it too much, because the higher this is, the higher the engine's gonna be, and the more top-heavy this thing's gonna be. So I think I'm gonna bend it somewhere like 5 or 7 degrees, something like that. We don't want to do it too much. So this is 5 degrees, and it looks pretty good. Again, we don't want to bend this too much. I think that looks good. Let's do that. So check this out. Now I bought these bearings on Amazon because they were a little bit cheaper, and these are the 1.25" bearings I'm going to be using for the rear suspension. Now check this out. Ah, lovely. So yeah, they're not supposed to have this much play in the bearings already. These are brand new. Yeah, no wonder these were a lot cheaper. So I'm gonna use these for mock-up, but once we get this vehicle running, I'm gonna switch these out with a lot better bearings and just use the housings and the metal plate and everything. Go Power Sports actually has some really good bearings that are the same size as this, so I'm just gonna buy them from there because yeah, I do not trust these. That is garbage. Alright, so let's start working on adding these two pieces of tubing right here. This is really going to judge how big this thing's going to be, how much leg room we have, how wide the frame is and everything. Now, I've been looking at a lot of pictures of trophy trucks on Google, trying to get inspiration for how those frames are built and how they look, because I really like the look of them. And I'm noticing that there's no rounded corners, there's no bends on the frame on a trophy truck. All the pieces of tubing go to like a hard point. Normally on a frame like this, I would have this piece of tubing be bent in a little bit so the frame kind of has a taper to it, but on trophy trucks, they're more just square, they're boxy, and this wouldn't have a bend. This would just be a hard corner. So I'm going to do the same on this. I'm also trying to figure out how close can I get this piece of tubing to the tire without the tire hitting the frame when the suspension moves up and down and the tire's turned and everything. So I think this is a little bit close. Right now the spindle's a little bit tilted. It's more like that. So I think that's it's a little bit close, but that's plenty of clearance. We don't need that much clearance on here. So yeah. Also, this piece of tubing is 20 inches from this one, and that's going to make it to where the frame is 50 inches wide, which is I think going to be plenty for a two-seater. "15 degrees. So when I first laid everything out, I was getting really concerned that this vehicle was going to be massive, but now that the frame is starting to take shape, I'm now a little bit less concerned about how big it is. I think it's the tires. The tires just make this thing deceivingly look giant. And actually, this is only 3 or 4 inches wider in the front than the CBR 1000 and 4 inches narrower than the VF 1000, so this thing is... it's not really that big. Right now with the A-arms completely flat, this thing is 2 inches narrower than 6 feet. And again, 6 feet is as wide as a Can-Am X3 and also as wide as a Jeep, so it'll definitely fit on Jeep trails as well as most side-by-side trails. And this thing's just going to be, it's going to be a little bit long, so, but I don't mind it being a little bit long, but it gives us more leg room, more room for the engine, transmission, all that kind of stuff. So now I did buy new seats on Amazon. Again, we're not using these seats. These are just for mock-up. I bought some new ones. And I actually bought them with an adjustable back to where you can lean them back and forward. And I bought the mechanisms to be able to slide them back and forward. So that'll be kind of cool. Next video, we're going to start working on the rear suspension. Hopefully, middle of next week, we get the seats get here. We can install the seats. Because we kind of need to install the seats before we build any more of the frame. Because that really judges how high the frame needs to be. I really want to make sure we don't have any height issues when we're wearing helmets. You know, the CBR 1000 is a little cramped in there, and you only have like 1.5 inches of clearance between the top of the frame and your helmet. So I want this to be just a little bit higher. Also, I'm trying to figure out how am I good, because on a normal trophy truck, you basically crawl through the window. There's no doors. The doors isn't that big as well. But I kind of want this thing to be a little bit easier to get in and out. So I'm kind of considering making doors, so I don't know. We'll figure that out in the next couple videos, but for now, I gotta end this video here to thank y'all for watching. I'll see ya in the next video.